Sometimes people ask me if I miss home, and it's an interesting question. I could imagine people are wondering how I can, be away from where I'm from for so long and never really even come to visit hardly at all. And, it's a question that makes me kind of trigger a little bit because, yeah, of course, the answer is complicated. In a lot of ways, I do miss home. I miss the familiarity. I miss my community, my friends. I've been very blessed in that way. I miss seeing family from time to time. I didn't have the closest family, but we definitely would see each other for holidays and things like that. So there are some things that I do miss, but do I miss feeling like a threat just for existing or like there's always a threat to my existence? No. I don't miss watching the news and hearing about school shootings every day and bomb threats and bombers and this and that and all kinds of insanity. Okay, because where I come from, the US, these are the kind of things that you're inundated with on a day to day basis. And, as a parent, I do not miss wondering if my children are going to have to, do an active shooter drill at school or might even have to deal with one eventually if they stayed in the school system. Okay. These are the things that I do not miss. So I want to be clear about something before I get into this is, I love where I'm from. I'm proud of where I'm from. I'm proud of who my people are. I understand that we have been living and my ancestors go back many centuries in the United States. Okay, they ain't got me with the we all came from Africa thing. I don't believe that. So I know Turtle Island. I know that that is my ancestral land. I'm not confused about that. I love where I'm from. I'm proud of being a sister, melanated from the United States, from America, and all the ish we have had to go through to find a modicum of some kind of quality of life there. Okay, that none of that is up for debate. And even when I lived in the US, I didn't have a bad life. I had a decent life. I had nice community, sister friends, people that I could always, be collaborate with on things and unite with over things and support each other in situations. I had those things. I have them more there than I do currently because this is a newer building of community that I'm doing here in Brazil. But there was a weight that I was carrying. I didn't even really fully recognize it all the way until I was able to finally put it down. This constant kind of low level fear, this humming, this noise in the background that kind of kept me occupied and preoccupied and unable to be fully present, not just for me but for my children as well. Um, you know, I think it was mainly the fear for my children that really broke me. It really made me decide that I had to walk away for good. And for those of you who are new here, I've been gone from the US for over 7 years now. Now, I was in a territory prior to this. So I have spent in the last 5 years, maybe about three and a half of them in Brazil, where we are now. But I also have been in the U.S. territory of St. Croix before that. So not a total break from the U.S., but definitely, a different energy in a way. There definitely was some of those influences of just being an American, basically colony, like a colony of America. There were influences there, but it was still the Caribbean. It was still different in its own way. So one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, especially if you don't have children, is that, when you have children, your tolerance for certain things it changes. You don't have as much tolerance for insanity around you because these are the things that your children are going to be exposed to. So, you start doing the math, you figure it out. And I was tired of constantly having to sacrifice sanity and a natural way of living and a lifestyle that felt authentic to exist in that rat race energy. So a lot of people ask me how did you end up in São Paulo? Like how did you choose São Paulo of all the places in Brazil? Um, and honestly, it wasn't really a big plan for me. A little backstory: during the pandemic, it was in 2021. My children and I were living in St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, and I had gotten tired of the experience we were having there with like the brainwashing. Everybody was like so fearful and running around half crazy over this perceived threat of, COVID. And I was just tired of the whole energy. And I had been wanting to come back to Brazil for a while. Brazil wasn't on that, at least not yet. They just weren't terrorized by this thing. And I was like, I'm gonna go back to Brazil. I'm gonna take my kids to Brazil. And I was blessed. I had the finances to do it. And so we moved to Itacare, which is in the Bahia area of Brazil. So not Salvador. Salvador is further north of where I was. So I was more central south. And we moved to Itacare. I'd always wanted to go there. I had already lived in Salvador for a year previously as a single woman, and I always wanted to go back. So we went to Itacare, and I'm going to have to insert some images. 'Cause this place was like very paradisal, very beautiful, amazing waterfalls and rivers meeting the ocean, and quilombos, which were the like escaped slave communities that just ran all the way up the riverbed. Very melanated, lots of hippies too, waterfalls, what they call cachoeiras, and just a beautiful place, just coastline for miles and miles. Itacare was really quite a beautiful place. And, they had a really cute little town center that offered a lot of goodies in a small space and a lot of great food. The cuisine was the best I've ever had in Brazil. These were some of the things that I loved about living there. I also got a sense of, people not being as open to foreigners and a certain amount of xenophobia that, wasn't crazy, but it was enough for you to feel enough isolation there that it got old. So after a while, I had bought a car out there. I had started to purchase some land. I was trying to make moves because I had always wanted to live in Brazil, and I was kind of moving too quick, and some things didn't work out. I ended up having to sell my car and get out of there. I just decided it wasn't the best place for us. So we were on our way. We were kind of considering leaving Brazil. We wanted to go to Rio and Sao Paulo and spend some time in the south a bit. So we flew into Sao Paulo, and lo and behold, the minute I touched down in this concrete jungle, because we didn't touch down in Pinheiros where I live now, where it's just more green, more trees, more of that vibe. We touched down in and went straight to took a long ass ride from the airport and ended up in city center in the Bella Vista kind of Bexiga area. And I don't know what it was. I just, even though it was urban and, definitely was some black folk around, but it wasn't like what I was used to in Bahia. I just felt something. I felt something click for me. Come to find out, the area Bexiga that we're in was one of the historical black, Brazilian neighborhoods of Sao Paulo that I'm pretty sure they got, pushed out of, because that happened to the melanated, the black folk here in Sao Paulo. They kind of got pushed into the periphery of the city, but I just felt the energy. And so we were there, we were exploring, and I kind of fell in love with Sao Paulo and was like, well, we're not leaving. And so we ended up living in Sao Paulo for several just months at that time. We had already been in Bahia for a year, and I don't know, I got the itch to travel a little bit more. So we took off. We went to Costa Rica for a while, stayed in Costa Rica up north in Fortuna for like 6 months, and just healed. We went through like just a healing period. I had gotten out of a bad relationship that I had carried from the Virgin Islands and was trying to maintain even in Brazil, and it was just a mess. And I just wanted to heal. So we went and we did hot springs every week, and we lavished by the volcano. It was just pristine nature. And Costa Rica was beautiful, very bland though on any other level. No culture, no vibes, no nothing really. So I knew, we weren't going to stay there and that we needed to probably go back to our island where we'd been based for many years on and off, just to go and be with our loved ones and our community and our friends there for a while. And so we did that. So it has been quite a journey. This is all since 2021. We went back to St. Croix. We had a great time. I got a really high paying job. My daughter got a job with my girlfriend, and we just worked and enjoyed friends and community, and it was amazing. And so that was that. But even though we were having a good time with community, I always had this thing where I never felt fully comfortable on St. Croix with it having that colonial status with the United States, and also just being, kind of a low vibration sometimes, a lot of unnecessary violence, surprise, sneak attacks, shootings, and different, just stupid stuff. It was like, man, you can't even be in paradise. There's shoot up paradise. And then I started thinking about having a teenage son and what that could look like for him, given that most of the targets of these shootings will be boys that look like him. So I was like, yeah, I'm not thinking in high school or the end of middle school into high school here is going to be the right move. I don't know what is the right move, but I think we're going to hit, São Paulo again. And so we moved again. And yeah, that is how we ended up back in São Paulo. And I will say, I feel lighter here. Me and my children all seem to feel lighter here. And it's not because Brazil doesn't have its issues. It absolutely does. They have their racism. They have their anti-blackness. I'm not going to try to stand here and try to sell you Brazil like it's a perfect place, because it isn't. But there is a vibe here. And when you get here and you experience the lightness and the levity and the ability to just kind of move freely, mostly, and again, we're foreigners, so we don't have the same experience as, Afro-Brazilians do. But to be able to move freely in a relaxed way, to choose, a neighborhood that is green and nice and pleasant and relatively safe, and to not always be feeling fearful. I mean, the most you have to worry about around here is somebody taking your phone, right? So with all of that being said, I feel like over and over again, I would choose Brazil. Like, I would choose Sao Paulo. I feel like I made a really solid decision. So one of the things that I didn't expect with moving to São Paulo is the amount of the joy spirit that exists here. Similarly to other parts of Brazil, there is a spirit of joy through whatever experience you're going through. One where there's like this underlying sense of positivity. And happiness even in difficult circumstances. And I think Afro Brazilians embody this more than anyone because of everything that they've been through in this culture, and indigenous people. Been to Brazil, I'd lived in Brazil before, mostly in the north, but one of the things that I didn't know to expect here in Sao Paulo was this equal sense of culture of joy. I'd always just assumed since Sao Paulo was going to be primarily more of the white Brazilians, that there would be less of that projection of that energy, and more of like a hardcore city urban almost gray type of spirit. But what I found was that joyous spirit, maintaining a peaceful and a high vibration through whatever circumstances you're going through, definitely is permeating throughout the actual culture of Brazil that everyone shares that's from here. And it has been a pleasant surprise. I mean, literally there's so much to do, there's so much fun happening at any given time, from samba in the streets, or outside of a bar at any time of day. Art everywhere, people celebrating art everywhere. The other day I came to the park at 7 in the morning, and there was a group of adults listening to some, beautiful bossa nova, some MPB music out loud, and they were standing in a circle holding hands, doing some kind of exercise. I don't know what it was, but it was some kind of unifying exercise. There's always this sense of like community, of joy, of being together, togetherness, that I find to be really permeates here, and it's very influential and inspirational if you're someone that comes from, like the U.S., where things are a little more, not a little more, but things can be feel very, very disintegrated, very individualistic. It's not a communal place in the least bit, from what I remember of living there, right? And just seeing my children get to experience it firsthand and be able to enjoy. I'm a knock this. Be able to enjoy seeing people interacting like humans, you know what I mean? Like being communal, being community oriented, helping each other, talking to each other. Now, believe me, this is not the case everywhere and across the board here. Like, even I live in a building in a pretty nice area of town in Pinheiros region of the city. And, everybody is pleasant, but I don't know my neighbors. Like, I do not know my neighbors. So there's something about this spirit that is particularly seen in social settings where you're out and about. But the reality on the ground is sometimes you'll be living in places and you won't even know no one, especially if you're the only like black person in the area. So you do understand there is a separation in a way here, but you won't be treated poorly, and that's the thing. I'm at a place in my life where I don't need white people to accept or validate or like me. I really don't care, but you do need to be respectful. And this, unlike somewhere in the US where I've been through a number of things and attacks just based on my skin color, um, here, they're going to stay in their place more. Also, because it's legally, they are supposedly, um, legally mandated to make sure that they're not saying anything racist, behaving in a racist way, or doing anything like that. It's actually illegal here, and you can face legal circumstances, lots of fees, and also jail time for it. So that's another reason why, I'm just grateful. And again, still, even though I don't connect with anybody in my building, I go across the street. I have a beautiful shopping market over there, and everyone there knows me and loves me. I vibe beautifully with everyone. So, it just depends. But overall, especially when you get in the festive settings and things like that, you realize, wow, these are joyful people, and they carry that and they walk with that, and it's nice. It's a nice influence. Okay. Yeah, why I chose Brazil, I would say it's a layered situation. So the quality of life. I find that there's less of the fear porn and the influence of fear mongering in the culture, and more of a leaning towards promoting joy, promoting relaxation, people being able to just kind of be themselves. The city that I live in is very much a live and let live type of environment. Honey, you could wear anything, do anything, be any gender, it would do whatever you want here, and nobody will say nothing or give you problems. And in some ways, that is a good way to live. I mean, some say, because it means you can be the full expression of yourself and not really have problems. But I'm not saying that we don't have the same thing in the States, but it just takes on a different meaning here, especially as a Black person, because we know that as melanated folks in the U.S., there's a whole lot of people trying to control and manipulate your energy for their own purposes, but not really appreciating you. And this is something that I have seen in the US very predominantly. So here I can just be what I am, and it's okay and it's fine. And then there's a certain amount of, deep appreciation for it, but also, okay, allow that to do what it do. And so this expresses itself in the way that when you're here, natural hair, the women here, you will rarely see a woman wearing her hair in a straight style, a sister, or anything like that. If they're wearing it in a straight style, it's their hair. Usually, the women, their hair is coming out their head the way it is, and that's the way they wear it. And it's usually curly, poofy, big afros. Still maybe of a different hair texture. But sometimes it will be straight 4C. But a lot of times their hair texture is more of the three variety. Maybe up in the threes. So, but still, women rock their shit. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot less makeup. There's a lot less of people, kind of doing so much extra stuff to try to make a certain beauty standard, and more people just being, roots, natural vibes. Also, the fashion thing, yes, it's here, and you will see it, particularly when you're out on Paulista. So you do have that element, but there's more so an energy of wear what you wear, do what you do. Nobody cares. And so it's not like a New York City where you got to be stepping out every second looking like you about to hit the runway or something, right? It's more down to earth. It's vibes. It's chill. It's roots. And so that for me is a positive because it just speaks to the mentality of the people. And that is what you will experience here in Brazil. More down to earth, more real, more authentic. And I needed that. I'm someone who had been, awake for many, many years since I was a child in terms of to what was going on in society. I've always been able to see, so I wasn't able to turn my head and not see things for what they were. So a lot of the discoveries that people are making about the government and about the culture of the United States and about, how zombie-like things are, and I was seeing that back in the 80s and 90s. So it's like I feel like in some ways it makes you feel separate from society in a way. So I never could relate to America. So the first time that I came to Brazil, which was way back, like in 2001, I um I was like, wow, these people, this is a totally different energy here. These people, like, they're joyful. They have their culture. They're still drumming and dancing and singing all through the place. They have their martial arts form. They have their stuff still. You know what I mean? They still. Hey, hey, yeah. So yeah, yeah. So, Brazil's not a perfect place. I don't ever try to like promote it in that way. It's a mixed place. Like anywhere you move to in the world, you're going to experience things that are, probably very life changing for you, very unique to your experience, especially being from the US. Because most countries people live better, in my experience, than Americans do. but you also find things that turn you off, that you don't like, and so you have to be open-minded. One of the biggest things that I have had to cultivate in this lifestyle of being semi-nomadic with children over the last whatever 20 years was like a high degree of flexibility, being able to flex, being able to acquiesce, to be humble. You know what I mean? To realize that just because I'm used to things being a certain way, that doesn't mean that that's right or that's the way that it is anywhere else. And if I'm in another place, I'm not going to necessarily do like the Romans do, but I am going to be humble. So I would never, for instance, try to tell a Brazilian, hey, being fanatical over soccer is just kind of silly, over football, as they call it. Yeah, in my mind, I don't get it. You know, I don't get it, but at the same time, you still have to understand and give people their grace and allow them to be what they are. And I mean, this is something that obviously just in life in general is a good way to move in the world. And I think living in São Paulo just kind of embodies that in a major way. Again, just let people be themselves. Just live and let live. Less judgment. You feel way less judged here. Now, I'm coming from the Virgin Islands and the Caribbean in general, but especially the Virgin Islands has its own special version of like very judgy culture. And so I'm coming from somewhere where, live and let live is not a thing. It's more like, what can I find negative to say about somebody and what they're doing in a moment? And so I'm coming from that, and there was a certain amount of trauma attached to that with me. But here, you just don't have that experience. It's not part of the experience. Now, if you were to move to rural Brazil, you know, which I have done, my children and I have lived in Bahia, it's a little bit of a different energy. Doesn't mean that they're not still Brazilian and don't still move with some of the similar characteristics of the culture itself. But when you go into rural areas, they're smaller. People are more kind of watching out for how folks are moving. They are making and casting more judgments because you're under more of a microscope in these smaller areas. And that's here too. So again, nowhere is perfect. But at this point in time, with so much going on, especially in the US, and some folks just wanting to like have a simple, life where they can enjoy some goodness, on a regular basis while they're here. Um, Sometimes it's good to just get on out and go somewhere where you can have that instead of, having these bigger picture, ideals of fighting for your country and all these things that don't really make any sense because at the end of the day, they're using tech. They're going to be using tech against us on a global scale. And the US is going 1,000 miles per minute into this new world. The rest of the world may not be moving as fast, but they'll be following behind too. So nobody's saying that anywhere is going to be perfect. We're all going to have to adjust to a lot of things and figure out what side of the line we're on. But at the end of the day, I just think it's time for folks to make decisions and know what they're going to do. If Brazil is on your list, you're thinking about it, you're considering it, and you're considering Sao Paulo in particular, which especially for people who may want to do business in Brazil, I highly suggest you consider. Um, hit me up. My links are below. My tour links are below as well. You can schedule a consultation with me, or you can just email and let's talk about what it is you need, okay? So I hope everyone just has a beautiful day. I hope you enjoyed this video, just a talking head video. I just wanted to get that out to you. And yeah, stay tuned. Subscribe. Please like the video and even leave me a comment. All of that is very helpful, okay? Peace, peace.